Picture this. You're holding a silver coin in ancient Rome, year 64 AD. It gleams in your hand, pure and valuable. Now fast forward just 2 centuries. That same coin is barely worth the metal it's made from. And the greatest empire the world had ever seen is crumbling. Sound familiar? Because right now, as you watch this video, the exact same pattern is unfolding with the US dollar. And I'm going to show you the chilling parallels that nobody wants to talk about. What destroyed Rome wasn't barbarians at the gates. It wasn't moral decay or military defeat. It was something far more insidious. Something that happened slowly, coin by coin, decision by decision. And it's happening again, right now, in slow motion. Let me take you back to the beginning. When Emperor Augustus founded the Roman Empire, the denarius was the gold standard of its time. Actually, it was the silver standard. Each denarius contained about 95% pure silver. It was real money, backed by real value. Soldiers were paid in denarii. Taxes were collected in denarii. Trade across 3 continents ran on denarii. The Roman economy was the envy of the ancient world, and the denarius was the reason why. But here's where things get interesting and terrifying. The emperors discovered something that governments throughout history have never been able to resist. They found a way to create money out of thin air. No, they didn't have printing presses. They had something even simpler. They had the mint. Emperor Nero was the first to really exploit this loophole. Faced with massive expenses, rebuilding Rome after the Great Fire, funding his lavish lifestyle, and maintaining the empire's military, Nero had a problem. He needed more money than the treasury could provide. So in 64 AD, he made a decision that would echo through history. He ordered the mint to reduce the silver content of the denarius from 95% to 85%. 10% less silver, but the same face value. Instant profit for the government. Free money, or so it seemed. Does this sound familiar yet? Because what Nero did with silver, modern governments do with paper and digital entries. When the Federal Reserve engages in quantitative easing, buying bonds and injecting liquidity into the economy, it's doing the exact same thing Nero did. Creating money out of thin air. The only difference is the technology. Romans shaved precious metal from coins. We add zeros to computer screens. But let's get back to Rome, because this story gets so much worse. After Nero opened Pandora's box, every emperor who followed faced the same temptation, and almost every single one of them gave in. Emperor Trajan reduced it further. Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who should have known better, debased the currency to fund his wars. By the time we reach Emperor Septimius Severus in 194 AD, the denarius was down to just 50% silver, half the value it once had. A century and a half of slow, steady debasement. Think about that for a moment. If you were a Roman citizen who saved denarii your entire life, you just watched your life savings lose half its purchasing power. Your retirement, your children's inheritance, your security, all evaporated not through theft or fraud, but through official government policy. They called it necessary. They called it pragmatic. They said it was for the good of the empire. Sound familiar? Now, here's where the parallel becomes absolutely undeniable. In 1971, President Nixon took the United States off the gold standard. Just like Nero breaking the silver standard of the denarius, Nixon severed the last link between the dollar and real tangible value. And just like in Rome, the justification was expenses. Vietnam War costs, social programs, a growing deficit. The same story, different empire, same excuses. Since 1971, the dollar has lost over 85% of its purchasing power. That house your grandparents bought for $15,000? Now it costs $400,000. Not because houses got better, but because dollars got worse. That's not inflation. That's debasement. It's the same thing that happened to the denarius, just spread out over decades instead of centuries. But wait, there's more to this story, and it gets even darker. The Romans discovered that once you start debasing currency, you can't stop. It becomes a drug. Every new crisis requires more money creation. Every solution to the problems caused by debasement is more debasement. It's a death spiral, and Rome rode it all the way down. By the time Emperor Diocletian took power in 284 AD, the denarius was essentially worthless. It contained less than 5% silver. 5%? The Roman government tried to fix this with price controls. They literally carved maximum prices for goods and services into stone tablets across the empire. The punishment for violating these price controls was death. And you know what happened? The entire economy moved underground. Black markets flourished. Trade collapsed. The very thing they were trying to prevent, economic chaos, they created through their solutions. Does any of this sound remotely familiar? When governments create too much money, prices rise. When prices rise, governments blame greedy merchants, corporations, anyone but themselves. They propose price controls, windfall taxes, regulations. And what happens? Shortages, black markets, economic distortion. The same playbook, 2,000 years apart. Here's the really terrifying part. In Rome, the final stage of currency collapse triggered something called the crisis of the 3rd century. For 50 years, the empire tore itself apart. 26 emperors in 50 years, most of them murdered. Civil wars, military coups, provinces breaking away. Historians debate many causes, but they all agree on one thing. The currency crisis was at the heart of it. When money becomes worthless, society becomes unstable. When people can't trust the basic medium of exchange, they can't trust anything. The Roman Empire never fully recovered from this crisis. Even when Diocletian and Constantine tried to restore stability, even when they introduced new coins with real gold content, the trust was broken. The damage was done. The Western Roman Empire limped along for another 2 centuries before finally collapsing completely in 476 AD. But the real collapse, the financial collapse, happened centuries earlier. Now let's talk about where we are today. Since 2008, the Federal Reserve has created more dollars than existed in the entire history of the United States before that point. Trillions upon trillions in quantitative easing, COVID stimulus packages, bank bailouts. The money printer goes brrr, as the internet meme says. But it's not funny. It's the exact same pattern that destroyed Rome. Government spending is out of control, just like Imperial Rome's spending was out of control. The national debt is $35 trillion and counting. That's more than the entire GDP. Rome had the same problem. Massive military expenses protecting borders, social programs to keep the population happy, bread and circuses they called it. Sound familiar? Enormous bureaucracy consuming more and more resources. Every crisis met with more spending, more money creation, more debasement. The defenders of modern monetary policy will tell you it's different this time. They'll say we have sophisticated central banks, economic models, democratic institutions. Rome had sophisticated administration too. They had economic advisors. They had brilliant minds trying to solve these problems. It didn't matter. The fundamental mathematics of currency debasement cannot be escaped. When you increase the money supply faster than economic growth, you get inflation. When you do it for decades, you get debasement. When you do it long enough, you get collapse. This isn't opinion. This is historical fact, proven over and over again. Rome proved it. Weimar Germany proved it. Zimbabwe proved it. Venezuela is proving it right now. So what's the real reason the Roman denarius collapsed? It wasn't one emperor's decision. It wasn't one crisis. It was a system that incentivized short-term thinking over long-term stability. It was leaders choosing easy solutions over hard choices. It was the belief that they could somehow cheat the fundamental laws of economics. They couldn't, and neither can we. The question isn't whether currency debasement leads to collapse. History has answered that question definitively. The question is, are we going to learn from history, or are we going to repeat it? Right now, watching the money supply explode, watching inflation eat away at savings, watching the same patterns emerge, the answer doesn't look promising. The Romans had an excuse. They didn't have 2,000 years of history to learn from. They were the cautionary tale. We don't have that excuse. We know exactly where this road leads. We've seen it before. And yet here we are, walking down the exact same path, making the exact same mistakes, expecting somehow to get different results. That's the real reason the Roman denarius collapsed. And if we're not careful, it'll be the real reason the dollar collapses too. The only question left is, will we wake up in time to change course, or will future historians look back at us the same way we look back at Rome, as a once great empire that destroyed itself, one debased currency at a time?